You're now tuned into the Real Rap Radio Show. I'm your host, Walil Archer on Downtown Hot Radio. Now, my special guest, Joe Roberts. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Lil. Thank you so much for asking.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So let's talk about your book.
Well, Johnny Crystal was kind of a funny thing to start with. It's difficult to tell people how you get ideas for books. This one was kind of strange in that I was not thinking of anything in particular, and this name, Johnny Crystal, simply popped into my head. Now, I don't know anybody named Johnny Crystal. I don't know anybody named Crystal even. But anyway, I said, wow, that's kind of a cool name, though, Johnny Crystal. And I said, all right, what can we do with this thing? And then the first line, is always a little, it kind of sets the tone for the book. And the first line of this book is um, Johnny Crystal was small, not little, small. He was 5 feet tall, weighed 129 pounds when he was 12 years old, weighed 129 pounds when he was 30. So he was a small person, but he had some attributes that were outsized of his stature. For instance, he was very, very strong. When I mention it, it's not only strong, but he was circus strong. He had a couple of brothers who were 6 feet tall, and they would not, well, they would eventually they would get away to playing games with him, and they would arm wrestle, and then they'd have to put a book under his elbow because he was so small. But anyway, they'd start arm wrestling, and Johnny Crystal was kind of bored with the whole thing, and he was just there like a rock. And this other guy is just pushing, pushing. And when Johnny said, "You guys had enough," and then he'd push him down. So it was an outsized kind of strength that he had. Also, he was extremely handsome. He had this very curly chestnut kind of hair, full hair, and he let it grow long. Had good chiseled features, even a cleft in his chin. So he was a devastatingly handsome guy, but he was small. And so girls kind of shied away from that because they couldn't deal with the fact that he was 5 feet tall. But other than that, he had this very, very resonant bass baritone voice. And well, is that going to be a bother with that? Like,
No, you're fine.
they're cutting the lawn over there, so I hope it doesn't bother you too much. Anyway, the point of the matter is that he was very, very strong, and he would go with his brothers. They would go to a restaurant somewhere, and they would just be having a dinner. And so some women would come by, and they'd see these three handsome guys, but they'd spot Johnny, who was the best looking of the bunch, and they'd unbutton their top button. They'd go make a sachet over to them, and then when they all stood up, Johnny was, a foot shorter than these big two guys, and it was a kind of an interesting thing. But he had this great voice. He was a borderline genius. So that combination really made for a guy who made some money in a big way, in a big hurry.
And how long did it take you to write this book?
About a month.
Okay. Did you self-publish?
Yes,
Okay. Who did your book cover?
I did.
Okay. So you design all your book covers for your books?
Yes. Tell you the truth, I've had some unfortunate problems with publishers who say they're going to do. This was my first venture into uh, publishing. The thing is, originally, when I started writing these books back in, well, when I was 75, um, I really had no interest in publishing them. I was just writing them because I enjoyed the writing. And I actually didn't let anybody read the stuff because, frankly, I didn't care what they thought about it. I just enjoyed the process. That's all. So I didn't really care about whether it was going to be published or not. But then my family said, Dad, we ought to have a copy of this stuff just to for the family to read it. I said, well, okay. So I just, went to Amazon with KDP and published them myself. But that was the extent of it. So, they're not formatted, except now they're getting formatted. But yeah, so I just published them and seemed to be okay. But of course, if somebody reads them, they're going to say that, well, there's no chapters and stuff like that in the original form, but they will be in the when we get through with them.
Okay. So how long have you been writing books?
Since I was 75, I am now 89, and I am going to, the good Lord's willing, I'll be 90 on November 3rd.
Nice, 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 nice. And what inspired you to start writing? Because you just like writing, so you just was writing, and like you say, you
Well,
did.
well, what happened was my wife passed really early. She was only 62 from pancreatic cancer. It was 1999. And I had been in radio for some 50 years, and I had retired in that same year. So I had some time on my hands, and I got an idea for a story, and I just started writing, and the words just seemed to come kind of easy. I probably don't write in a classic style, that is, as far as constructing an outline and all that kind of stuff. I just sit down and I just write. And that sounds very simple, and it really is. It just seemed, the words seemed to flow. And so I had this idea about this guy who was praying before the statue of the Blessed Mother, and he thought that the statue smiled at him, and of course he thought he was hallucinating, and he said maybe he's a little needs some more water or something. But anyway, it happened again and again, and it got to the point where he was able to start doing weird things, like he didn't know how to read or sing in Latin, and all of a sudden he could. He would be able to recite vast passages from the Bible and Gospels and stuff, which he never was able to do before. Anyway, that was the first book. It was called Holy Instrument. And after that, they just kind of took off. The next one was something about this woman, this harried woman. She calls and she's kind of frenzied, and this calls, and this fella answers the phone, and she's expecting her girlfriend to answer the phone. And it's this very cultured guy, very intelligent, obviously well read, and his voice was like that of an actor. And she was like a little befuddled. And so anyway, they get into this conversation, and she was apologizing for being so harried, and he's this very, very calm guy, and he said, "Listen, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's fine." And anyway, he was this bachelor guy living on the west side of Park Avenue, had all the money in the world. He was by himself, lived a very, very sedate life. Everything was in place. And this woman was like a hurricane. But when they hung up, he found that he was rather exhilarated by the fact that he was talking to this woman who was so full of life. And this woman was so impressed with the fact that this guy would even talk to her. And that book was called The Right Number, because the play on the wrong number, right number. So, funny way you come up with these titles and these ideas, but they just happen.
How many characters would you say is in the book?
In this book, in the right number, or in Johnny Crystal?
And Johnny Crystal.
Oh, in Johnny Crystal, there might be as many as 10 characters. Most of my books have storylines independent of the protagonist. So there's a story that is a story within the story, actually. And there is this story about this Annabella Rose, which is a story all by itself, because she was in this kind of soup kitchen place where she was scrubbing pots and pans, and this Simon Legree kind of guy was after her and always on her tail, and there was no air conditioning, and she was sweating. She's a big brown woman, and she needed the job, but she also baked pies, and that's how Johnny Crystal came in contact with her. He had gone to the supermarket, and he was in the greengrocery area, and he picked up a peach, and he heard a woman behind him say, "No, not that one." And it was this woman who said, "No, you got to get a peach that's heavy." And so a consequential conversation with that woman, they got to talking, and they said, "Hey, maybe we could have coffee in the cafeteria in the back of this supermarket." So they did. They went back there and they had coffee. And this 14-year-old girl comes and asks if there's anything that she can do for them. You have any pie? And she said, "Oh yeah, Mama makes the best pies." So she brings up out a piece of pie, which a huge piece of pie, but it was the best apple pie Johnny had ever tasted in his life, and he insisted that he had to go and meet the person who baked this pie. So he goes to the and the girl was frightened because she said, "No, if I take you back there, he's gonna fire her, and we really do need the money." And so he said, "Don't worry about it," because by this time he was a multimillionaire. He knew what he was going to do. So he goes to there, and it was so hot. And there's this woman scrubbing away on these pots and pans, and sweat is pouring off her. And he gets to talking to her, and he said, "Did you bake this pie?" And she says, "Yes." And so, "What's your name?" And she says, "Annabella Rose Turturro." And he said, "Wow, that's a wonderful name." He said, "Well, most people call me Bella." "Oh, no, I will never call you Bella. Annabella Rose is just flows off the tongue like poetry. That's always going to be your name, Annabella Rose." Anyway, winds up, he says, "Look, take care, get rid of this thing. We're going to go and have dinner." He said, "No, no, I'm going to get fired." He said, "Doesn't matter. I've got plans for you." So this guy comes in, the Simon Legree, and said, "I told you that you weren't allowed to have visitors here, and I think I'm going to just fire your big fat ass, if you'll pardon the expression." And so Johnny just grabs his wrist, and he exerts a little pressure, and the guy starts kind of moaning a little bit. Say, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "This woman deserves an apology." "Well, no, she doesn't." And he squeezed a little harder, and the guy is now really in pain. And John just squeezed a little bit harder, and the guy is now agonizing, and he'd do anything. So he apologized, but in the process, he fires Annabella Rose. But Johnny eventually takes her and the daughter and says, "Look, I want you to bake pies for the companies that I have." He had several companies, and he had cafeterias and that kind of stuff. "I want you to bake pies for me. I'll pay $85,000 a year to do this. Are you willing?" And so they had this wonderful relationship after that.
Nice. Now, when it comes to creativity, do you base any of your books off of a true story, or all of them you just make up for the characters?
I just make them up. I got to say, though, there's no way that you cannot write a novel without incorporating some of your own experiences with people and characters that you come in contact with, and you incorporate them in some small way, and it's almost done unconsciously. But yeah, but basically, no, it. I just get an idea, and I just go with it. It's. I find it difficult to explain because I don't even understand it. How I can sit down at this keyboard and I could type for 3 hours straight and never run out of words. And sometimes, and the fun part of this whole thing is that I never know how the story is going to end. I know how I start with a title, And I start with the first line, and then it goes from there. But the story pretty much tells itself, but sometimes it zags in a way that I had no intention of going, but it does, and so a whole new storyline develops, and it's kind of strange. I don't mean to sound mystical or anything like that, because trust me, I'm not. It's just the way it is.
Now, what do you want the readers to walk away from reading Johnny Crystal?
Well, I just hope that they enjoy the story, because that's what it is. Most of my stories um, have have kind of happy endings, and the good guy always comes out on top, that kind of thing. While there may be some tragedy somewhere in the story, in the end, the epilogue really sums everything up, and things people usually live happily ever after. But I would hope that in the case of Johnny Crystal, there would be people who are, in one way or another, uh, we don't want to use the word handicap, but yeah, they have shortcomings. Some people can see better than others. I can only see out of one eye, actually. Uh, and it's just the way it is. But here's a guy who, despite everything supposedly against him, because our culture is geared to tall people, handsome people. So he was handsome, but he was not tall, and that was a big hindrance in most places. But he overcame that, and not only that, but he manifested his genius in his humanity, in that he took Annabella Rose under his wing, and he did some other things philanthropically that people didn't even know about, and he used his money for good purposes. So I would hope that people would say, well, here's a guy who, when he was born, his mother said, oh my goodness gracious, he's just a peanut. I don't know what's going to happen with him. And yet he winds up being a multimillionaire, and he helps an awful lot of people in the course of his lifetime.
Okay. And where can they purchase your book from?
Well, I have a website, and they're actually creating a new website, but for right now, it's author Joe Roberts Caputo.com, and all of my books are on Amazon under Books by Joe Roberts Caputo. So if you go to the Amazon, they will have a listing of the whole 24, 25 books so far, and I'm writing another one even as we speak. So it's kind of interesting.
And
There's
as we
always,
go ahead.
there's always some going on. It's just I because I have some physical conditions that don't allow me to do a lot of things physically. I spend a lot of time writing, because it's the one thing I can do without expending too much energy. And so I start my day by writing two one-page essays. And this is interesting. I also wrote a book on this, and it's called Suppose. And the premise is, how do you give a character something inanimate? I call them personifications. But anyway, it's like, what would a pebble say if a pebble could speak? Or what could a leaf say? The first one I wrote was about a withered leaf. It was hanging for dear life on the edge of a limb on a tree that was bare. And it was like December, and the winds were howling, and this little withered leaf was just hanging on, didn't know why. But and then I said to myself, I wonder what that leaf might be thinking. Of course, couldn't be thinking anything, but I imagined that it was thinking of when it was young and green and healthy, and they had thousands of brothers and sisters on this tree, and it was providing shade and comfort to birds and people who sat under it, and it was strong and healthy. And here it was, just hanging on. And I liked the tagline the best, because he said, he knew that he was also going to have to let go before too long, but not today. And that was my first one. And since then, I've written 400 of them, 400
Mm,
essays.
nice. And as we close out, any final thoughts or closing remarks?
No, I just appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and to spread the word a little bit. As I said originally, I had no idea about people reading my books, and now I'm now I'm 89 and going on 90, and I'm kind of hoping that maybe there is something there that somebody might enjoy. And this is a wonderful opportunity that you've afforded me to uh, talk about my books and maybe um, invite some people to either visit Amazon or visit my website, check out some of the books. There are a lot of them, different kinds of books. They're all different kinds. One is called Phenom, and it's about a 14-year-old boy who doesn't know how he can do certain things, but he's got this hand-eye coordination that is off the charts. And anyway, there are a bunch of different books for different people, but I think there's something for everybody. And I really do thank you so much for this opportunity.
My pleasure, Joe. My pleasure. So that's my time today on the Real Rap Radio Show. And I'll see you guys next time on the Real Rap Radio Show on Down to Hot Radio with Walil Archer. Thanks, guys.